Welcome back to the You Can Too podcast. On today's show, we have Chris Doe on the show. He is an Emmy award-winning designer, a loud introvert, a serial entrepreneur. He is so many things to say the least. He is also the CEO of the content education company, The Futur. And man, I am so grateful to have you here today. You are doing profound things in this world, and you are really helping us create a better future in the world. And I'm grateful to be along with this mission, man. So for those who may not be aware of who you are, can you give us a brief overview of what you're doing and everything about you?
Yeah, sure. First, thanks for having me on the show, James. I'm very happy to be here and
Absolutely.
spend some quality time talking to you. Okay, so
Yeah.
my story is a little complicated. I went to an art school, studied graphic design, and as soon as I graduated school, didn't want to do graphic design anymore. Got into directing commercials and music videos, and that's what I did under my other agency called Blind for 20 plus years. My life changes drastically in 2014 when a art center fellow student asked me to go make YouTube content with him. And that was the farthest thing from my mind. Like, YouTube, isn't that where like a bunch of like pretenders go to make content? No one serious
Mhm.
like myself would go there, would they? And so, you know, the rest of the story. 8 years later, here I am. I don't do any more client work. I'm creating content full time with a team of 14 full time people with an additional team of 4 or 5 people working for us remotely as on a freelance basis. And so that takes us up to 2023.
Yeah, I want to jump back even further than that, to be completely honest. I
Okay.
want to jump back to you coming over to the United States as a
Yep.
first generation immigrant. And I want to know about your mindset, your vision, what life looked like in the early days to kind of know how you got to where you are today.
Okay. I was born in Saigon, and in April 30th of 1975, as the country collapsed under communism, we fled, and we wound up landing, of all places, Kansas City, Missouri. I have no memory of my home country. I have never been back. And so, as far as I know, I'm American, but I feel a little bit funny because we don't look like everybody else. And my parents are doing the best that they can just to make a living. And I'm just trying to figure things out. And there's lots of things that, as an American, you would grow up knowing and expecting. I have never been exposed to. So there was
Hmm.
culture shock, but I didn't even know what it was. And
Yeah.
for most of my young adult life, I've always felt as a stranger in a strange land, never quite fitting in. And it's been really tough on me on emotional, like and also like how I matured into adulthood. My identity was all scrambled. I just often wonder, like, when I watch a TV program like the sitcoms, why doesn't anybody ever look like us or talk like us? Why doesn't our home look like that? Why don't we have those kind of meals? What I didn't know at the time was very few people's lives actually looked like that, even Americans, because this was some kind of hyper sterilized version of like relationships and ideal family situations. So no one lived like that. But for me, it was like, there's something off and I can't quite figure it out.
Yeah. I know you moved a lot around, and when you were young, what did that have on your experience, especially trying to fit in and feeling like a loud introvert, as you say you are? It's like you're moving around so much. I bet there was a lot of resistance to trying to feel like you found your tribe or you found people that really felt like that you could open up to almost.
Yeah, I did some calculation. I think up until from like 3 years old to 18, I think we moved or I switched schools every year and a half. And
Yeah.
that created a lot of like emotional turmoil for me. This is pre-internet, pre-cell phone, and back then it's like you'd meet a friend at school. The only time you'd ever talk to them is in school. It's not like we're calling each other up on the phone or anything. And I never
Right.
knew when we were going to move. I just felt like we're going to move, and I would start to build a friendship. And the next thing I know, my parents are like, "We're moving." I'm like, okay, new school. And to me, as a young person trying to fit in, a bit socially awkward and looking and sounding different than everybody else, oftentimes being one of only a few Asian kids in school, it was very unsettling for me. And I always felt like maybe it's not worthwhile to build friendships because
Yeah.
I'm not used to having any long term friendships. And it was just, as you can imagine, it's pretty tough. So never having your roots into any one community, never feel quite safe like I can build a long term friendship with somebody. And to this day, I only have one childhood friend that I still talk to on a semi regular basis, and it's just by coincidence that we actually wind up living within 30 miles of each other now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's That is crazy. I'm in a similar position where I have one friend that I can really count on. Like I feel like he's almost like my brother. Like I always tell people, I don't remember meeting him. So that kind of gives you a
Wow.
broad overview. When you were growing up, knowing that you never really felt like you could fit in, and then also coming as a first generation immigrant, how did you overcome the wiring that I bet was just ingrained in you almost?
I think it was just about developing certain survival skills. And so whenever
Mm,
time I would switch schools, my greatest fear was I don't want to eat lunch by myself, and I'm unfamiliar with the school and like the orientation of things, and just being totally in my head. I was like, where am I going to eat? Like, I feel like a total loser because I'm going to go to the cafeteria, I'm going to grab something and sit on the grass. Where? By myself, It's like, and I had to just deal with the anxiety that came with. And eventually, ultimately, somebody would befriend me, or I would find another loner. That was my survival strategies. Find another awkward weirdo, like usually a punk goth kid or something like that. I'm like, hey, are you eating lunch with somebody? I'm like, do you mind if I join you? And I would just sit there and we would hang out. And it was a friendship of convenience, not of mutual values or hobbies and interests. And so ultimately, that quote unquote like lunch buddy, it didn't last that long because we're not into the same kinds of things.
yeah. When did you give yourself permission to think big?
Well, one of the benefits of not having a lot of friends and social relationships is you are in your head a lot. And if you grow up with not a lot of means and resources and always felt like you're living like like in a state of scarcity, you can decide to accept your fate in life, or you can just start to dream. And I chose the latter of the two options. So even as a young person, I started thinking like, okay, I need to make money because I want stuff. And how am I going to make money with no skills? And so I was scheming things. And kind of interesting is my older brother, who's 4 years older than me, he gives me this
Mhm.
book by John Fitzgerald, and it's called The Great Brain, or The Adventures of the Great Brain. And it features the story of some young kids, I think in Utah, turn of the century. So we're talking about the 19th century here. And it was told from a perspective of the younger brother talking about his older brother, who's like a master schemer. He would always figure out some scheme to make money. And I thought this was wonderful. Like he would create
Yeah.
like carnival games and or raffles and things like that. And I just started to borrow these entrepreneurial concepts from the Adventures of the Great Brain and try to apply it in real life. So in junior high, my my cousin, his dad, my uncle, he owned a liquor store, and he was able to buy all kinds of amazing candy at wholesale prices. So I would ask my cousin, hey, can you put in an order for me? And I'm going to go and sell the candy. So I'd buy it at wholesale and I'd go and sell it at retail. I'm like, this is pretty good. So if you don't have a lot, you have to dream. You have to dream your way out of your life situation. And I failed from one business idea after the next. When I say business idea, it's like, let me try and sell Christmas cards. That didn't work because I'm a horrible salesperson. I don't like talking to strangers. That was a dead idea. Let me try to do drawings and sell them to people. Again, it's like, I need to have some social skills in order to turn the talent into a profit or business model. But I didn't have that.
Did you take on, or did you at least know you were taking on? Because I feel as though everyone I bring on this podcast has a similar mindset of a delusional optimist. Like they just believed more than they could see almost, right? Was that conscious that you took on that identity of a delusional optimist when you were so young?
100%. But I didn't think I was delusional. And I'm pretty sure everybody that's been your guest didn't think they're delusional either. And
Yeah.
so here's another story, right? So I'm 16, 17, and I work at a silk screening shop. Okay. I'm a senior in high school, and I see like, oh my gosh, there's a business opportunity here because they can print shirts. And my boss charges a certain amount of money. I think at that time, $5.25 for a 4-color print job on a white Hanes Beefy t-shirt, which was the standard. So I thought, look, what am I doing here working for 18 bucks an hour, inking things when I can go out there and create an idea, design, and then go and sell it? So I decided to make a caricature from one of my teachers, and everybody loved this math teacher and they loved the drawing. So I'm like, okay, I want to take orders for this. And so I printed up 30 shirts and they sold out. I'm like, this is great. Let me try to do something bigger than this. And this is where I fail. Let me make a class t-shirt for the graduating seniors and let me go and sell that, except for no one knew me and I had no way to sell it. So I printed a couple hundred shirts and sold like 40. And so now I've got a bunch of t-shirts that nobody wants to buy and I don't know how to sell them at all. So my mom, who fronted the bill, was like not happy with me about that. So I thought for sure there's no way it could fail. But of course it's going to fail because I have no orders.
What did starting so many different things, figuring out along the journey, what did that teach you to be able to build and think to the level that you're thinking at now? Because now it's like you're thinking probably in decades, not even months, years. You had to think in a different spectrum. Knowing that you tried so many different things,
Yeah.
starting young, and then now you've been in the game for many years. How have you been able to switch your mindset from thinking in weeks, months to thinking in decades even?
I want to point out something that even in those periods of failure, I didn't record them as failures. It's a little bit of delusional thinking. And my son's the exact same way. And you can recognize it when someone else has this, right? I'll give you a short story and then I'll answer your question. My son and I, every once in a while, I drag him with me to go for a walk and go hiking. He hates to do that. He wants to be in his room playing video games. So during one of the hikes, he's like, he made an observation about something, one of our neighbors. And I said, how do you know that to be true? And he goes, because it is, Dad. I'm like, no, it's not. It's actually the opposite. And I said, watch. And we walked a little bit further and I was able to somehow demonstrably prove to him he was wrong. And I asked him this question. The question I asked him was, I think if I'm keeping score, you're about 0 and I'm about 16,433 times right. Do you ever get tired of being wrong? Because why do you always go against what I'm saying? And he turns to me kind of defiantly and he said, Dad, I only need to be right one time and you'll be wrong. So he doesn't think about his losses. He only thinks about the wins. So when I see that in him, I kind of smile and like, all right, that's a good answer. It's a good answer. You're right. You only need to be right and I'll be wrong one time. Never give up. No matter how much I try to beat you down, never give up. Resilient boy. And so even though I've had all these failures in my life, I never felt like I failed until somebody brings it to my face and says, Chris, this was a total failure. You're a loser. Never do this again. Learn from this. And luckily, people didn't do that when I was growing up. Now, when we switch over to this new mindset, I'm 50. How old am I? I'm 51 years old. Okay.
51, yeah.
Yeah, I'm 51. And the way I look at it is like, I've made enough money so that I can live the rest of my life and I can take care of my kids and my wife. Everything's good. So there's a bigger question now, which is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And so when I tell people I'm in the third act of a 3-act play, and the rest of my life now is dedicated towards making a dent in the universe, trying to leave the place better than I found it. And so now I'm talking about not 1, 3, 5, or 10 years. I'm just from now to when I die, to when I expire. And you don't know when your card's going to be pulled. I could get hit by a truck tomorrow, or I could have cardiac arrest and just die. So I want to make sure in the best way that I can to make the biggest impact on a day-to-day basis, assuming that I can live longer, but not always expecting that that's possible. And so there's only one move left on the board for me, which is to try to do what I can to influence the direction of the way people learn and the way people teach. And that's it.
Yeah, you're in the act of service now. Now that's the intention almost every single day,
Yes,
right?
it is.
With everything that you're doing, people are trying to live a life that they're aligned with work that pulls them. I think is like the way that I word it for this podcast. Like I felt pulled to do this, not pushed to do it. And
Yes.
so every time I hop on a podcast, I'm like, I'm excited. This is something that I really think in a very long-term perspective on. How can people start looking more towards building a life that they actually love and start the service now instead of waiting till later?
Okay, how old are you?
19.
Okay, you're a pretty young person. I admire your moxie and how clear your focus is. And if you're a young person with that kind of focus, more power to you. But I will say this, and I've seen many people from 16 on to 66. Not everybody gets that clarity right away. And I just want to make sure that if you're listening to this podcast, wherever you are in your life, I'm not here to make you feel bad about that you haven't figured it out yet. My wife's a little bit older than me and she still hasn't figured it out yet. And it's okay that there's not a universal timeline that we all have to adhere to. But the sooner that you can recognize what you're put on earth to do, what really drives you, what you're pulled towards doing, and how you could be of service to other people, the faster you're going to be in alignment with who you're supposed to be. And this is a critical thing. So I had this debate with a friend of mine, and he was citing some kind of study that said that they had observed like 2,500 people in the UK, and how every 10 years they'd check in with them to see who they were based on a set of personality traits. And they found that every 10 years, the person is completely different. So it's not predetermined as to who we are. So he's like, maybe we never are anybody except for who we are in the moment that we are. Right. And I think he thought of that as a pretty empowering message. And I thought so too. But I said, what if you haven't actually changed at all? You're only rediscovering yourself as you go every 10 years. So the first 10 years of your life are pretty much dictated by your primary caretakers, right? And maybe through socialization and conditioning, you're burying your true self. And it takes decades for you to uncover and dig that up and reveal who you really are. So the people who did that study every 10 years saying, well, you've changed, you keep changing. Or maybe you're just becoming more of yourself. I'm not sure. But I look at most people that we would consider old, say 60 and up. I moved it to 60 because I'm 50, right? So I'm like, I don't want to do 50 and be considered old. So let's say 60 and up, that you're old. You know that most people in that age range don't give a flying F what you think about them. They're comfortable wearing what they wear, eating what they eat, and being exactly who they are. And they've stopped trying to be someone else to make someone else happy, because they realize now their best health days are behind them, and they have less days alive than they have before that point. So we got to just stop pretending. So I think getting to know who you are and uncovering that the sooner you can in your life allows you to be more of yourself. And I think that's when your happiness and your health and probably your wealth will increase.
I'm in full support of that. My life really shifted when I started the podcast, because I felt as though I was trying to be someone that I wasn't almost. And I like that mindset where you're like shedding layers of the person that you thought you had to be, and that's uncovering the person that you truly are. It's not like you're creating a new version of yourself or anything in that regard. And I think for a lot of people, and I think you struggled with this as well when you were first starting, but the external narrative, and then also the internal narrative of fighting past the judgment, the internal noise that is telling us that we're not capable of doing it, we're not capable of creating a life that we love. Like, we can't have both, right? It has to be either or, it can't be and. How were you able to break past that one? And then also for so many people, how do they overcome that internal narrative and external narrative that, that's not possible, or they shouldn't do it because it's a creative field that it doesn't usually work out, right? I feel that's expectation we're placed on too much.
Yeah, I think that is becoming less the narrative today, especially as we're living in a very fluid society where
Yeah.
it used to be you had to have a degree, and all the big tech companies said, we don't care about the degree anymore. And especially now with AI and ChatGPT, the things that a human can do without the assistance of traditional structures like schools, universities, and diplomas, what you can do now is remarkable. My son is 17 now, but when he was 16, he launched an NFT project and made $30,000. How he figured out how to do this and how he entered into these communities, I have no freaking idea. But to put that in context, he's filing taxes at 16 when I didn't even know what taxes were when I was like 22, because I was still in school. I was still going down a very traditional path, hadn't made enough money. And it probably wasn't until I was 23 years old that I made enough money to compete with my 16-year-old son today. And that narrative is not going to be isolated. It's going to be 12-year-old kids, 10-year-old kids, depending on how much access their parents give them to the internet and how much they embrace
Yeah.
technologies and change. And so things are just moving so fast. In the old days, we didn't have media, we didn't have social media, we didn't even have the internet. So your ability to see someone doing what it is that you want to do and being successful at it was very finite. Like if you grew up in a small town, it would be even worse, right? But I grew up in Silicon Valley, and I just didn't see many examples of living designers who were actually professionals. The only kind of artists and artistic types that I saw were like carnies and people working at the fairground or people working on the street for pocket change. And that did not look like a stable income to me. It looked
Yeah.
horrible. But now you can literally type into the internet and find someone who looks like you, who sounds like you, who's doing what it is that you want to do and making a living doing that. So when we can model ourselves after something that exists, it's a lot easier for us to say, yes, that's real. That's a possibility. And I can do that too.
Yeah, the world that we live in is profound now because you're right. And that's insane to hear about your son as well. And it's just living proof. And it's a really big reason I started this podcast because at least I grew up in a small town as well. And so not seeing it, it almost seemed unfathomable. And from external perspectives, it was. And so taking a different perspective and then the whole mission behind it is we have to unlearn these beliefs that were almost forced onto us that don't serve us. I know something that you talk about, and I've seen this as I think it was a Twitter post that you posted, the paradox principles, and I really want you to dive into those because those are really, really impactful, and I think a lot of people get a lot of value.
Now, I won't be able to recall them off the top of my head because it's still a bunch of loose concepts that I'm working on. But the general premise is almost everything you believe to be true is untrue, and everything you believe to be false is actually true. I'll give you a couple examples. One thing that we think about is let's talk about sales, okay? That we think by asking for sales and being pushier about sales that we'll actually get more work and we'll make more money. But I found that if you serve people more and you don't want the sale and you hold the other person's needs ahead of yours, you'll actually get more sales and you'll make more money. So they seem to be the opposite, right? And so if you tell me what a popular belief is and a conventional thought, I will challenge you and I'll tell you that actually the opposite is true. Here's one other one. And I'm not being that clear about it right now, but let me try again. There's a belief within creative space that quality is the number one thing that you should pursue. So it creates a culture of perfectionism where we think if it's not perfect, we should not release or publish anything. And the underlying sentiment is actually a good sentiment that we should strive to do the best work that we can. But perfect is an elusive thing that is, I don't know if anybody's ever been able to achieve, with the exception of a few remarkable individuals throughout history. So what it does is it creates an impossible standard of quality that no one can achieve, and we're quick to pounce on, mostly ourselves, and then the larger community to pounce on us when things aren't perfect. And it can be horribly scarring emotionally for lots of people that they never want to release something again. I read a post recently from someone who said, I put out some work, people tore me down. It's been 4 years since I posted something again. And that hurts me just to read that that somebody or many people were so cruel to someone and then to have this profound effect that it caused them to withdraw and it robbed them of an experience of creation and of getting feedback. Now, not all feedback is going to be good, and that's okay. And so that's a painful thing to go through. So I like to tell people the road to quality is through quantity. So quantity beats quality every day of the week when quality doesn't produce in quantity. And that's the problem. So we have this idea of excellence and standards that is ingrained within us or just pummeled into our brain when we're going to art school or design school, that we must hold these standards and nothing less than the best will do. And it creates a bunch of creators, designers, artists who don't ever share anything and are robbed of experiences that otherwise would present themselves. Now, one of the reasons why I was late on this call, this is very, I guess, relevant to what we're talking about. I got an email minutes before our call. It said, Chris, one of our speakers has canceled. They're having a family emergency. Your name came up. We'd like to invite you to come to the UK to speak. We have a budget of $28,000 for you to come. And I was really excited. I'm like, oh my God, how is it that my life is aligned like this when I'm about to jump on a podcast and a random email, I don't even know how they found my email, comes through and I'm like, wow, I have to check my calendar. I could make it work. For $28,000, I could make it work. I didn't fly to the UK. I could do that. Yes, please. So it's like, So that opportunity is available to me because I went through this process of creating a lot of content. Most of it did not stick. I'm not saying it's not good. It just didn't stick. Some of it did. And if you are that artist, that designer, who is probably even more qualified than I am, but you've never posted anything because you're waiting for that perfection thing, then this opportunity is not going to come to you.
Yeah. When I first started making content, I made it a habit to post every single day for a year straight. It ended up turning into almost 2 years. And I've made over 700 pieces of content in less than
Wow.
2 years because my thought was, if I just do it every day, then if I just don't stop, I just can't fail. So why not just release more than what most people are doing? Because if I don't start, same with the podcast. Like this podcast started off in my car because I thought I need to start it or I'm never going to start it. May not be able to have interviews yet, but I know that that's going to be the future. And if I don't do that, if I don't start now, I'm just going to keep putting it off. And I think a lot of us put it off until a later date for that exact reason. Because you've posted so much content, I'm curious, what has content creation taught you about yourself?
This is excellent. You know, there are multiple benefits to creating content. And the one that people often overlook is the ability to just think out loud in public. That's a form of
Yeah.
public journaling. Most people that I know and look up to and respect, they emphasize the importance of journaling. And I want to tell you, I'm late to that game. Like I remember in college, people are like, journal, journal. I'm like, yeah, whatever. No, I'm here to do design work. I don't write. What an idiot I was. And so 20 years later, after graduating from college, I started actually creating things in public and I discover all kinds of things about myself. David C. Baker writes about this is you, you gain clarity through articulation. So if we're
Hmm.
not speaking, if we're not writing, if we're not creating, we don't know what it is that we think. And it's very important to discover what it is you think, because the only thing that makes you different than someone else is your point of view, your opinion. And so when I create content, I benefit in multiple ways. I'm learning about myself. I'm like, wow, okay. I didn't know I knew this, and I didn't know this is the way that I could express it. And then I help other people along the journey who say things like, wow, you made it so simple for me to understand it. It's like, okay, you've helped me gain clarity. And the third benefit is you actually start to grow an audience or a community around the things that you care about. And then there are multiple benefits from that. And so I want to encourage everybody, whether you aspire to be a quote unquote influencer, podcast, or content creator or not, it's very important for you to practice articulating your thoughts. And why not do it in public where you get additional benefits versus just keeping it in a notebook somewhere?
Absolutely. I'm not much of a journaler myself. I've always found that after about a page, my arm gets tired, or I get bored, or nothing's flowing out. So something that
Yeah.
I've been doing really recently, and maybe this might be beneficial for you even, is I record voice memos in my phone, so it's like a voice journal. Like maybe I'm not exactly gonna post about it because it's not something to post. There's not much value there, but I'll record a voice memo and then I'll go back and listen to it and see what was going through my mind. And content creation has been a big aspect of that as well. Is like you're almost speaking to yourself. I feel that's probably for you. You're speaking to who you used to be, but you're also speaking to yourself once in a while. And I know you made something else about the three monsters. Can you recollect them? And I'd love to hear what your thought process is in overcoming them.
Yeah, I hate you because you actually look at the content and you know what you're talking about. And I just create things. I'm like, what did I say? I
I
think
know.
there's a couple of monsters, right? And I can remember two of them right now. There's the perfection
I
monster,
got
which we
you.
talked about, right? Which is this
Hmm.
desire to make something so good that it's irrefutable, that it's a great piece. And unfortunately, that very rarely is the case. And it helps develop a bad case of creative constipation. You're afraid to make
Yeah.
something, you're afraid to release something because nothing is ever good enough. And the interesting thing is, like most artists, you're changing and growing every single day. You're smarter today than you were yesterday. You have better taste today than you did yesterday. So as you create a piece and you review it the next day, you look back and you're like, that's terrible. What was I doing? This is terrible. This is a piece of garbage. So that dies too. So you have a lot of unfinished projects. Number two is
Hmm.
the imposter syndrome, I think. Um, is that the other monster that we're talking about?
The advice monster was one
Oh,
of
the
them.
advice monster. Let me, you tell me what I talked about. Okay, the
I'll
advice
be right here for
monster.
it.
Okay,
Yeah.
the advice monster is, there's this expression that everyone has an opinion and everyone has a butthole, and I don't necessarily
Hmm.
want to see either one. And so the thing is, we're dealing with so much of our own internal crap that we can't solve. And so what do? We try to solve other people's problems because it allows us to avoid what it is that we need to work on. And I read in The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier, and he talks about this need for us to give advice to other people. And he says, if you're in a management position, if you're a leader in a company and you give advice to people, you rob them of their own ability to self-discover, and you cheat them of their own ability to be more resilient, more self-confident, and their problem-solving skills. And so what we need to do is we need to stay quiet a little bit longer, ask a few more questions, and give a little bit less advice to allow people to discover the solution for themselves. And I believe that in most contexts, many people, when seeking advice, actually do not want advice. They ask for help. And what you want to do is ask them questions back to lead them to their own answer versus your answer. And when you do so, you teach them valuable life skills, and you allow them to really own the idea, the concept, or the solution. And I think that's really important. So we have to put the advice monster away.
Full support of that. I have The Coaching Habit right next to me. Looked at it right as soon as you said that, because when I started my coaching journey, it was something that you can't help someone help them. You have to help them help themselves. Almost, really, is like the way of, you think you're helping someone by giving advice, but really, when you let them get to their own answer, you ask the right questions that lead them to the right answer. That's how they feel that it actually sticks in their brain. It's how we create better memories. For you, like, we see the consistency. I feel you have the skill set because you have multiple skill sets, right? What are the less obvious reasons that you've been able to find success?
The less obvious reasons to find success? What do you
Mhm.
mean when you ask that question? What are you looking for?
I'm looking for some things that maybe are surface level that we don't think of, that you believe that has had a big impact on your path to creating a life that you now love, and you get to wake up every day and that you love the work that you do.
Okay. I can give you some advice to be like, so it's advice on how to be more successful.
I think it's just what's the things that you recollect that maybe is not so surface level from the external perspective that has had a big impact on you. And this is genuinely specific to your position.
Okay. I'm going to try to answer this question. If you don't like the answer, ask it a different way, and then I'll try
Okay.
again. Okay. I think, and this is in alignment with a lot of things we've been talking about, which is I think I am very clear about what it is I want, but very flexible with how I get there. Because
Hmm.
oftentimes, and the way I would describe it is this: imagine you and I were in the woods together and we're explorers. Like, we got good survival skills, right? And we know where we need to get to is really, really far away, maybe a couple hundred miles. And we've determined that there's a path that we should take. And the two of us have different philosophies. So when we go on the path, we didn't anticipate this, but nights before, there was a really strong thunderstorm, and it washed away parts of the road. And the person who's stuck to the path and said, we must go this path because everything else is unknown, is just going to wait for it to clear. I'm the kind of person who's like, you know what? The path that we thought was going to work isn't working. There's an impediment, there's a barrier. We have to figure out how to get around this. And I don't want to wait. So I'm going to go down a different path. I'm going to walk down and follow the stream until there's a place where we can cross, and I'll find my way back to the path. And this is an important metaphor for a lot of people to understand, because there's many people who won't even go on the journey until they have sufficient proof and evidence that the path that they're going to go on has no detours, has no false steps, and will only get them to their destination. So those
Yep.
people never actually go on the adventure. There's a second type of person who goes on an adventure, and when they hit a roadblock, don't have the skills or are so in love with the path that they're going to sit there and wait. The third type of person I would identify as myself is like, I kind of have a plan, but if other things come up with better opportunities, different paths present themselves, or there's a barrier to that path that we're on, we just adapt, improvise, and we overcome. And that's what we need to do. And so with our meeting, our company meeting, what I would say is, I want us to hit this financial goal. I want us to be able to create this kind of impact. I'm not exactly sure how to get there. And it freaks everybody out because they're like, our boss, the leader, doesn't know how to get there. And what are we expected to do? But what I think what's happening is, when we get clear about where we want to go in life, Dr. Price Pritchard writes about this in U to the second power, U squared, which is When you're clear about your goals, you magnetize yourself, and the means and the methods will appear. It's like the laws of attraction. Like
Right.
my business coach told me, you need to be a public speaker. I'm like, what do I need to? I don't know what I'm doing. But as soon as he said that, and I said, okay, I commit to that. Lo and behold, in my inbox, 1 week later, less than 1 week later, somebody invites me to do public speaking. I'm like, that's a little
Wow.
bit spooky. And so I say, we're going to be a $10 million company this year or next year. I don't know how we're going to get there. But then all of a sudden, ideas start to float up. I'm like, oh, there's a multi-million-dollar idea. Let's try that. It might not work. And if it doesn't work, I'll find another way to get there, but we're going to get there. So I'm really doggedly determined to reach a specific objective of my life. I'm super
Hmm.
loose about how we get there.
So amazing answer. 10 out of 10. I think it's, and I want to, there's like two questions I have from that, because I think it's really powerful what you said. The flexibility is big, especially in entrepreneurship, where you feel like it's going to be point A to point B, but really it goes point A, Z, Y, X, P, all the, like, you never know. How do you know when to pivot because I think the sunken cost fallacy for a lot of people, like, I'm going to go all in on this and I'm going to keep going until I hit my goal. And some people stick way too long in said thing. How do you know when to pivot? How do you know when to be flexible?
That's a very good question. And it's super individual because sometimes it
Yeah.
looks like you're quitting too early. And sometimes it looks like you're stuck and you will never quit. And there are better options out there. For me, I have to rely on a couple of different things. What is the data telling me? And given the data, have I honestly given my best effort? Have I tried a couple of different ways to overcome this obstacle? And if I have, then I say, it's time to move on. But oftentimes what people do is they only have one plan and the data is not positive. And so they're like, we're done. This can't work. Well,
Hmm.
that expression of it can't work for you in this moment in time. And I found this to be true too. Literally, you could do the exact same thing 6 months, 7 months later, and it will work. It's just at this point in time, that expression of the idea didn't work. So try other expressions. So what I like to do with my team is use the Eisenhower graph, come up with a bunch of different solutions, and do the thing that is the easiest, that's going to have the greatest impact, and just work down the list. Oftentimes, it's not solution 1, it's not solution 10. Somewhere between 3 and 7 is the answer. We just got to work through it. And here's probably the most important thing to take away. When you try something and you fail, learn from that and apply it to the next iteration. This is really important because oftentimes people don't reflect on the experience. They don't make any improvements or tweaks to what they're doing. And they just do a different version, but the same kind of like mindset, which might work, but more often than not, you've wasted a perfectly good failure. So never waste a good failure.
I love that you take that perspective on because failure, I replace it as feedback, because that's, if you're searching for it, that's what it should be. For you in this space, like, you've been in it for in multiple different aspects of it. What skills do you wish you developed earlier in your journey, or which skills at least do you feel are the most, have had the biggest impact on you and your field?
I would say it's not so much a skill, but mostly a mindset. So
Mm,
I went to design school because I wanted to let the design do the speaking. I remember very specifically, I think it was in my let's see here, my junior year. I was with one of my favorite type instructors, Simon Johnston, and he said, like, we were doing book cover designs, and he said, when you go to present your final book design, just give us a little something, and then we'll critique the design work. I remember that, and so when people would go and present, most of their designs were terrible, in my opinion. They started talking a
yeah.
lot, and so you can always tell the designers who don't do a good job. They just wind up telling you a big old story. And then I look at the finished piece, like, how's that related to the story you just told us? And it's a bunch of just BS. And I'm anti that, right? And so when I go to present, I remember the rules, which was speak a little bit about it. So I said, this is my idea and this is the expression. And I stopped talking and I went back to the group and they started critiquing it. And somebody asked, can you tell us more about it? I'm like, I think I've said everything I needed to say. And I was being kind of angry and flip about it because I'm like, our professor said to do this, and none of you are
Hmm.
following what he said. So I don't really understand why you want me to follow something that isn't what he asked us to do. But
Yeah.
it created this mindset in me, which is if the work is good enough, don't speak about it. that only the people whose work is not good do they speak about it. And that was a really harmful thing for me to tell myself. So for the rest of my design career, throughout school, I very rarely spoke about my work. I put the work in, so I didn't ever need to speak. So the number one skill that I needed to do at that time was learn how to be a great designer, to put in the work, but also how to speak about it, because words influence people. They shape how
Yeah.
we look at things, they give things context. And I did not develop that skill until much later on in my life, into my 40s, when I actually started to talk about the work more. And now I would do that in small circles. In when I was teaching, I could speak about design and be very articulate about it, but I didn't do it in a public forum. So I was very self-conscious when I started speaking in large groups of people. And that's a skill for the 21st century. Whether you're 16 years old or 66, you need to learn how to communicate persuasively.
Full support of that. Full support of that. I think, like you said, it's rather not speak if the work is if the work is good enough. And I think for a lot of people, maybe they don't have enough confidence in the work to be able to take that perspective or that stance on their work. There's 3 M's that you talk about. Do you mind walking through what those 3 M's are and how they relate to people creating a life that they love? Because I love your work so much, and I'm so grateful to have
Thank
you on
you.
here.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm glad you
thank
asked
you.
a question that I remember the answer to now. So I'm so happy when you asked it. I'm like, thank God, this was recent. So, okay. Um, the 3 M's are this, okay? And they're done this way, so it's easy for us to remember it. The first is mastery. That a lot of people want to get famous and make money and monetize and do all kinds of crazy stuff when we haven't actually learned any real skill. And I'm often criticized by people who say, Chris, aren't you teaching people how to like price things when they have no skills? Why don't you focus on the fundamentals? Teach them the design skills that they need to learn. And my
Mhm.
response usually is, my expectation, my assumption is people have developed skills, and then they don't know how to communicate their value to others. And that's what I want to focus on. So this is a reminder that Malcolm Gladwell says it takes about 10,000 hours to be really good at something. That number's debated a little bit, and it's okay if it's
Yeah.
the numbers more or less, but it does take some time to develop proficiency in doing something, repeated exposure to the same problem, for you to be able to spot patterns and to know how you want to solve a problem. And confidence comes from the repetition of a task over and over again. And so
Mhm.
people are not willing to do that, especially today. Everybody's attention span is like that of a gnat. And so you'll do
Yeah.
something like, I'm good enough. Well, maybe, but most likely not. So first focus on mastery. Whatever skill set that you have, just master it. The next M stands for media, which is, okay, you have a skill. Now you have to learn how to play the game of media and content creation, because you could be the world's
Mhm.
greatest fill in the blank, but nobody knows about you. So your opportunities that you're going to see are going to be very small. And this is not good for you. Reference David C. Baker, The Business of Expertise. He has a formula. It says confidence equals opportunities divided by capacity. The number of opportunities you get divided by your ability to do the work. So if I have 10
Yeah.
opportunities, but I can only do 2 projects, my confidence score would be 5. If you flip it upside down, if you have 2 opportunities and your capacity to do work is 10, it's 1/5. That's lousy. And if you focus on creating media and content, and you do it with a spirit of generosity, then more people are going to know about you, more people are going to give you more opportunities. And we have to learn how to play in this thing that people are calling the attention economy. That those who can
Mhm.
command it, who can capture and leverage it, will be the like rich beyond their dreams. And I believe this to be true. So we get to the last one, is monetization. That's the last M. So mastery, media, and then monetization in this specific order. That when you're able to master the media and you have a skill set, monetize what it is that you do, that's the right time to do it. And the great thing is, when you master media, you're going to get brand sponsorship deals, you're going to get collaborations, you're going to get opportunities that you never thought possible. And I think if you can focus on that, you're going to do really well.
Yeah. It's so succinct and it's simple. And I think a lot of people are going to try to overcomplicate what you just said to stay where they are, essentially. For you, you've been in this space. I keep saying it, but you've been in this space for a long time. And as someone that's been in the space for 2 years and not even just getting started, what do you wish someone had told you when you were getting started?
I would tell them to do exactly what you're doing right now, which is to start creating content, articulating your ideas, figuring out who you are, your perspective, your opinion right now. So the fact that you started when you were 17 then, yeah,
Yeah.
is just mind blowing to me. And I love that. And, you know, so here's the weird thing. I have two boys. One is 19, one is 17. So I have children that are older than you and younger than you, which is pretty crazy that you and I are talking, right? And so my 19-year-old is now going to be a sophomore in college. And he's coming around now kind of late, like, Dad, let me help you with the media and the content stuff. Like all my life, I've been waiting for this moment to happen. He's extremely
Yeah.
bright. So he's very proficient with what he does. So I'm super excited. My youngest started making YouTube videos when he was 13. Unfortunately,
Mm.
he didn't catch wildfire. So he kind of got discouraged, I suppose. And so he's on to other things, but I'm pretty sure he'll come back to it. It's hard to ignore creating content when we have so much gear around the house, microphones and cameras. Like, I need to borrow a camera. I'm like, take it, use it.
Yeah.
So I would encourage every parent and everyone who's listening to this to start getting into the content game right now. And you don't need fancy equipment. Yes, you can have a nice microphone, but your smartphone is everything that you need. I mean, I would improve the audio a little bit, but other than that, you don't need to do anything. And just get used to it. And you'll thank both of us later.
Amen. It's like I said, I'm living proof. I started with no microphone. I was in my
There you
car with
go.
my computer. That was the microphone for me. Where do you think people go wrong when it comes to whether it's creating content, building a brand, you know, really trying to scale something? Where do you feel they go wrong?
Okay, I'll share this with you right now. Is they're impatient. They want
Mm.
results too early, and I have a story as to why that's not good. Okay, but what people do is they are like, okay, I want to hack. I want to figure out a secret shortcut that no one has, so I can get my
Yep.
followers. And what they do is they go into the black hat stuff. They buy followers. They join engagement groups, and it's just artificial. And if
Yeah.
you think about that, like in real life, would you ever do that? Would you go down the street and pay people money to be your friend at your birthday party? Would you do that? Would you pay people to go and hang out at your wedding ceremony? I don't think
Hmm.
you would. So why would you do that on social? People think there are different rules to social than there are in real life. I'm like, I don't think it's that different. So what happens is people who buy followers get that spike of followers and fake
Yeah.
engagement. But as soon as you stop paying, they stop engaging, and now you have a dead account. I literally was talking to somebody earlier this morning. They have 10,000 followers on Instagram. And I look at their post, they have 0 likes on their posts. That reeks of like, this is not a real account. Like, you bought all your
Right.
followers. And that's the best way to destroy your account. Okay.
Hmm.
The thing I want to share with you is this. Let's say that you're a new content creator, and we all hope, and secretly or not so secretly, that our video is going to be fire and it's going to be viral and everybody's going to love it. Okay. Let me
Yeah.
tell you why you don't want that to happen. And you should pray that it doesn't happen to you. If you're a new content creator and you put out something, first of all, you don't know who you are. Like, you don't know your voice. You don't know what it is you want to talk about. You don't even know who your community is. And all of a sudden, one of your video gets like millions of views. You have an overnight hit.
Hmm.
And you're like, woohoo, amazing. Except for now reality sets in. What is the follow-up video? Okay. So now you're like, well, I made this thing and it was just on a whim, and it's not actually who I am, but it's what took off. So you're like, let me make a video for me now, like what I really want to make. And it gets no views. And now you have the false expectation that every video that you make is going to be this viral hit. And then people are like, we don't want to see that stupid video. We want to see more like this other viral video. And so your audience actually starts to take over who you can be. And so if you did a cooking video, and that's not what you want to be about, but that's the thing that takes off, now you
Yeah.
feel like you have to be a slave to what the algorithm and the audience wants. And so now you're making cooking videos and you don't even care about cooking. So this is why you do not want to wish, especially when you're early on, for your videos to go viral. After you do this for several years and you find your voice, your cadence, your flow, and your perspective, then you should pray for the viral hit, but not before then. So having early success is actually more detrimental, and it's one of the paradox principles.
Just gonna say that. Yeah, it is it's a trap because you get lost in something that you don't really get to decide who you want to be or what you want to speak about. And like you said, that's how it ends up being for a lot of people. I believe, and this is a mindset I've been taking on a lot, is focus on your intention, not your expectation. We all expect to blow up. We all expect it to be quick. But focus on the intention, why you started, what the mission is, who are you trying to serve, all of those things. And it doesn't matter if you grow a follower a day or 10,000 followers a day, or you lose a follower. It's going to be the purpose of doing it, again, is the intention. So I'm grateful that you brought that in. There's one last question I ask every guest, and I'm really curious to know what your answer is. What belief are you currently unlearning?
Oh my goodness.
Hmm.
That question probably messes up everybody.
Yep.
Oh, somebody's calling you. Oh my gosh, I don't know what the answer to this question is going to be. You know, I'm going to share something very personal with you. I'm a logical person. I'm a person who seeks evidence before I come to a conclusion. I find that a lot of people have a conclusion and then seek the evidence to back up the conclusion. I think that's kind of backwards. But I have to realize something, that not everybody wants to function the way that I want. And when I try to remind people, especially my wife, who has a lot of opinions on things, I'm like, what evidence do you have that to be true? And I'm just asking it like the way I would ask myself. And then I get weird looks from her, like, shut up, I'm going to smack you right now. It's just my belief. So I have to often remind myself that although I have a perspective and a way of working that seems to have worked for me and other people who want to follow what it is that I'm doing, not everybody in my life has signed up for that, and it could be super annoying. So I have to sometimes pause that part of my brain to say, you know what, we're just having a conversation. Everybody's allowed to do whatever they want, and I don't always have the right answer, even though secretly inside I think I have the right answer. So I just have to tame that a little bit.
I have a similar mindset, and that's why I like to ask that question, because the whole purpose of this podcast is to help people unlearn beliefs. And no matter where you are, we're all still unlearning. So, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. More than grateful to have you on here, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was fun. And thanks for putting my feet to the fire there, because I can't remember half of the things I've said.
That's what I like to hear, man. Thank you. Thank you so
Mm.
much.